Okay, so to start out with, I want to have everybody stand up if you would. I know, you thought you'd be able to sit there and do nothing. Okay, so epigenetics, that's what we're going to be talking about today, and it's the future of healthcare. So what I want to have you do is, anyone here who either themselves, someone they love, or their family members have been affected by heart disease, go ahead and sit down. All right, and then anybody who themselves, their family members, or loved ones have been affected by cancer, go ahead and sit down. And you can go ahead and sit down if you want. So sometimes I have to get to 3 or 4 conditions to get everybody to sit down, but you can see that those things are big issues in our world these days. These are our chronic illnesses, things like heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes. Those would have been the next ones we would have gone to. And so this really is the future of what we're faced with as a species and what we're faced with as healthcare practitioners. So on that note, I kind of want to see what you guys are headed into, in your schooling and professionally. So by a show of hands, who here is going into nursing? All right. And then, what are you doing?
Veterinarian.
Veterinarian. Anybody else doing that? And who else didn't raise their hand? Tell me another one. And who else is doing dental hygiene by hands? And did I miss anything? Anybody else? Nutrition. Public health? Okay. All right. So great. So all in the healthcare field, veterinarian, a little different, but some of the same stuff we're actually running into now with animals is what we've been dealing with in human health for a while because they're living like we are. Okay, so epigenetics. Anyone heard of that before? Have you guys heard of that? Anyone want to give a stab of what epigenetics is? Anyone? Can't get it wrong.
I'll try.
Okay, go ahead.
He said it yesterday.
Oh, okay. Well, it should be easy.
Turning on and off your genes. I don't know how to word it. Am I close?
That's close. Yeah, that is absolutely what epigenetics is. Epigenetics is the expression of your genes. So we all have many, many more genes and gene codes in each of our cells than we ever express in a lifetime. So what determines our state of that expression or our state of health or how our physical body is our epigenome, or how our environment affects the expression of our genes and determines what our cells do. So that's what epigenetics is, just like you said. Okay, so now we're going to talk about health in general. So the story about health we've been sold, is that our expression of health or sickness is a factor of our genes and random chance. Does that seem like something you guys have heard? We talked about heart disease briefly, cancer. We're kind of given the idea or the story that whether we have these things or not is really a matter of our genes, hereditary. My dad had heart disease, my grandfather had heart disease, so I got heart disease. Or random chance. And random chance in this case means I got old and my body broke down and I got heart disease or I got cancer. So further on, meaning that whether we get chronic illness or not is not really up to us, meaning because it's random chance or our genes, nothing we do really matters. Doesn't really matter what we do on a daily basis. So this is the story we've been told. It's inevitable that our body will break down as we get older. We lose our ability to stay healthy and we become dependent on help from the outside to stay alive. But this is what we see when we look at the statistics. The incidence of chronic illness, those are things like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, and so forth, has increased exponentially over the last 100 years while the human genome has not changed at all. So if it's our genes that are causing these problems, this doesn't really make sense because our genes haven't changed, but our expression of illness has exponentially increased. And then also when we compare the young, the adults, and the elderly of hunter-gatherer societies, so societies that somewhat replicate how all of us lived, hundreds or thousands of years ago, we find they're significantly healthier in chronic illness at each stage of life. In fact, to the degree that most of those chronic illnesses don't even show up in their societies. So then the question is, could it be due to genetics and hereditary factors? If these other things are true, which they are. So these are 3 studies that I'm going to talk about. And I believe if you write them down, I don't think the Australia diabetes studies will get you anywhere on Google, but because I don't know what that one was called. But the first is the enriched environment mouse study. So this is a cancer study, and a lot of cancer research is done in labs on mice. Mice have a very similar genome to humans. So the idea is that if we study how and why mice get cancer and what genes control that, then we could have a better understanding of how humans get cancer and what genes control that, then develop some sort of treatment based on that. So in this particular enriched environment mouse study, what they did is when they study mice for cancer, one of the ways they do it is there's a particular toxin you can inject into a mouse, and it has a reliable cancer-causing trajectory or lifespan. So you inject this in, and then in a certain number of days, a tumor starts. And then in a certain number of days, the tumor doubles in size. And then in a certain number of days after that, the tumor gets so big that the mouse dies. It's really reliable. Within a day or two, all the mice who are injected will die, from the same cause. So what some researchers decided to do was this enriched environment. And what they did is they took a group of mice, about 100, or I think it was 50 mice, and 25, they injected all of them with the same toxin. And 25 of them they kept the way they normally do in a lab, which is in little cages And they took the other 25 and they put them in the enriched environment, which simply meant they all were in one cage together. And so what mice do when they're in one cage together is they quickly develop a society, and they're able to interact and move around a little. So that was the enriched environment. Nothing with their diet, nothing with anything else other than, and they're not like how mice are supposed to be out in the wild running around eating mice food or anything. They're just allowed to socially interact and move around a little more, not in isolated cages. And they found that all 25 of the enriched environment mice never developed the tumor. And all 25 of the regular lab mice did and died like normal. So then they thought, okay, well that's interesting. Let's see what happens if we do it a different way. So they injected all the mice again, a new set of mice, of course. They waited till the tumors grew to about half size normal. Then they took half the mice and put them in the enriched environment and left the other half in the control. The enriched environment's mice, all of their immune systems took over and ate the tumors. Tumors went away, the mice lived, the other mice all died like usual. So this is an enriched environment. So, you have to wonder, when I read these things or hear about these things, I wonder, what does that do to the researchers in the lab who are studying the genes, right? Because the idea is that these mice all have some gene that's cancer-causing, and once it starts down this road, now we have to figure out how to adjust the genes. But all they did was let these mice socialize and have a normal, normal social life, or relatively normal. Again, they're not out running around in a field. So that's the enriched environment mouse study. And why that's important and why I'm mentioning that is because back to epigenetics and what that is. Our epigenetics, again, is how our genes express, or how our environment dictates the expression of our genes. So at any one moment, your cells and the genetic expression of your cells is simply an indicator or an expression of your environment. These mice, for example, in their enriched environment, expressed a healthier genetic profile or genetic cellular life than the ones in the non-enriched environment.